I'm a co-op board member at Sunnyside Towers, and when I first joined my board, I heard about Local Law 97, and I realized that we needed to mobilize the co-ops to come together and take action on this issue. So I found the PCCC, the President's Co-op and Condo Council, that had already been doing a lot of work on this issue, and the Western Queens co-ops are creating a separate coalition that we're calling the Western Queens Co-op Coalition that we started today.
So this is your first gathering, is it?
This is the first time that we've gathered under a heading such as that, the Western Queens Co-op Coalition. But honestly, this is this event tonight was a 100% grassroots movement among board members in our neighborhood. It was me, a board member of Sunnyside Towers, Charles Herzog, who's the board president at Celtic Park, Alicia Fernandez, who's the treasurer at Queensview, which actually is in Long Island City. She's very active on this issue. And we actually had 7 or 8 other co-ops that we've been working with, where even though their board members didn't speak, they've been helping us disseminate the information, sharing our flyers with board members, with shareholders, and just letting people know this event is happening, that we're trying to band together as a group. We haven't really had good representation. Co-ops haven't had good representation as a unit to defend ourselves or to stand up for ourselves when things like Local Law 97 come up. So we're trying to build something that can effectively act as, lobbying is such a negative term, but act as a lobbying organization to talk about the issues that are really affecting co-ops, are going to have a big impact on our shareholders.
So there was a couple of other meetings before, so is this the first time that you've all come together, and have you any association with some of the previous town halls that have been in the area?
So the PCCC, the President's Co-op and Condo Council, which is very active in Eastern Queens, and they've been hosting these town halls in Eastern Queens, and they basically were saying, can we get a movement going in Western Queens? What is the political sentiment or the vibe? How interested, engaged are people on Local Law 97? And to be honest, when I first started advocating on this issue, I really had no idea. When we hosted this town hall, I was like, it's either going to be 50 people or 500. I have no idea, because it's very hard to get a sense of how much people know and how interested they are. So it was very exciting to see, 200 people come out tonight, a Wednesday night, 6:30 p.m. in the middle of July, and see their engagement, see that they really do care. They're very concerned, and that shows us that this does have a lot of momentum. There is a movement that is building behind this issue, and there is a need for co-ops to come together and start advocating for themselves.
How many units are in Sunnyside Towers?
158.
Okay. And are the residents aware of what's going on, or what's the general feeling of what are people thinking?
They are aware. So the first step of awareness, the boards are going to be aware. So the boards are working with building managers. They're the first point of contact. These local laws come in, and we're basically told how we have to comply with them. So in our building, when we realized how Local Law 97 was going to affect us, we were like, we really have an imperative to let our shareholders know what's going on. So we hosted a informal shareholder town hall just in the lobby of our building to tell people that this is happening. We just put notices up about that by the elevators. If you're interested in learning more about this issue, how this issue is going to affect you, please come, just a regular evening in your own lobby. I was very surprised then that 50 people came. We had an extremely engaged community discussion, and that was sort of the first step of introducing shareholders to what they're facing. And it's really been, person to person, we have an obligation to tell people that this is coming and how it's gonna affect them. It's not really, there's not a lot of information about Local Law 97. It's very hard to find. It's a little confusing. So yes, the boards know, and then we've been trying to do events like this to really say to the community, this is what we are up against. This is what you should know about this law. And it's been very exciting to see that they do know and they are learning and they are interested.
What are your thoughts on the reaction of the people that came today? There was people from all over Queens. I gather Flushing was mentioned, Jackson Heights, so it's not just the Sunnyside area.
Yeah, that's incredible to me. I mean, that really just shows the spread of how much this issue is affecting people and how it's going to affect Queens especially. I mean, we have a lot of co-ops in Queens. We have a lot of actually homeowners in Queens. We have like a 40% homeowner rate. So that's very unusual in the city. So this is good. I think Queens is going to be the borough that changes the narrative about Local Law 97. So I mean, I was not surprised to see that most of the people that came are very concerned about the financial implications. I'm a little surprised every time that more people aren't like, but what are we going to do about climate change? And I do think there's a lot to be said about like why electrification is not necessarily an answer to our climate problem, and that's something that people don't really understand. We're being told that electrification is green, is going to help us with this very daunting, very big issue, and electrification is not a green solution if our grid is not green, which it's not. So
the purpose tonight was more of an information gathering, and so like this is your first one. It comes into effect in 5 months' time. It's kind of it's a race against the clock, isn't it? And I think the clock is going to beat a lot of co-ops and condos because the fines are going to start accumulating next year.
The fines start very small. So the thing about this law, and this is why at the beginning when I was introducing the event I call it a sleeping giant, is because in 2024 it's like you have to reduce your emissions a little bit, and maybe all you need to do is retrofit your lighting to LEDs. But by 2030 you're going to have to be undertaking these enormous construction projects that are going to involve bringing in tremendous amount of power to your building that maybe doesn't even exist in the ground currently, and those renovation projects could take years. So it's really 2024 is a deadline, and many buildings are facing penalties at 2024, but 2030 is when you're going to see the major renovations and the major maintenance assessments that we're really talking about. That's when we're going to have to actually start retrofitting our buildings to electric. And so I think in 2024, this is going to be a problem, but it's not going to be a huge problem. And in 2030, it's going to be a problem that could devour the entire housing market.
In terms of Sunnyside Towers, where do you stand? What requirements do you need to comply with the law?
Well, this is also why I'm saying I think 2024 is not going to be so bad, is that Sunnyside Towers gets a pass in 2024. So our building doesn't really have to do anything until 2030, except that we know to meet the requirements of 2030, we have to do a renovation project that's so big and so expensive that we would have to start planning for it and implementing it 5 years in advance, which would be a year and a half from now. So that's where it's like we could all sleepwalk towards this deadline because nothing's happening to us tomorrow necessarily, or at first it starts off very small, but by the time we get to 2030, if we haven't done a majority of the work that they're asking us to do, we're going to find ourselves completely screwed.
Have you found out what the work is? Bob was telling me in Glen Oaks, for example, they have to rip out the gas and oil boilers and put in full electric. Is that something that you have to do?
Every building. So the end goal of Local Law 97, it's sort of portrayed differently. Like I was saying, like in 2024, maybe you wouldn't see this necessarily, but the entire point of it and the entire goal of it is to make buildings 100% electrify. So every part of your building infrastructure that is currently gas would have to be converted to an electric system. So for heat, it's electric heat pumps, electric water heaters, electric cooking, all of it. You are not going to be allowed to have any system remaining that isn't a fossil fuel or natural gas system.
Okay. And so what's the reaction from residents there? Are they...
Honestly, we don't know if it's even possible. Like that's the thing, there's no feasibility study. No building has ever tried to retrofit from a natural gas system to electric system. We should demand a feasibility study. The reaction from shareholders is, like, how are we even going to do that? And we can't pay for it. And yes, that's like that. It's all disbelief. Do you know what I mean? It's like no one's like, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
Like, it's very, very complicated.
So what's the next step for you? Is it more town halls and trying to rally some politicians to maybe pass legislation to delay it?
Yes, so we definitely support Intro 913 to delay Local Law 97, and I think Bob said this really well, that a big part of that is trying to give us the timeline to build in other legislation that amends the law, that makes it workable where it currently isn't. I mean, first of all, we need to build a green grid, which we do not have. And I do think that we need to work with legislators to start introducing additional legislation that significantly amends the law. Like, just a delay is not that amendment, but we need to build in good faith efforts. We need to build in tax credits. We need to build in something that is going to help make this both affordable, but also say, listen, we need to be realistic about the timeline. We can't have all these buildings converting at the same time, and we can't have buildings converting when there's not enough power. And we need politicians to really work with us to talk about what that timeline realistically is.
Have you a Facebook group or Facebook page for where people can get more information?
We have a Western Queens Co-op Coalition webpage. It's westernqueenscc.org, where you can find our petition, you can find our call to action, and you can contact us and sign up for our mailing list. And we're definitely, we really need people to write to their city council.
Read our special Local Law 97 Climate series by grabbing a free copy of AM New York Metro or visit amny.com.